People's TV. And my name is Brother Mark. I'm one of the co-hosts on the show, along with Brother Bill. He'll be on shortly. And this show, like I always let everybody know, is produced by the People-Pueblo party that believes in common sense politics for the people, for the planet, and for the animals, because they're all connected, they're all linked. And it is sponsored by the People's Health Project Incorporated. Tonight we have a very special topic. We're going to be discussing the truth about COVID-19, and we want to go through certain points of it. First of all, how did it start? Where does it come from? Number two, how has the U.S. response compared to other countries? And then number three, are vaccines developed against COVID? Are they safe? So as we start tonight, I'm going to bring in my co-host, and he's going to say hi to you. He's going to say what's up. And then we're going to go to a very short video that we have tonight, which is kind of introductory of, how COVID got started. So, Brother Bill, what's up?
Hey, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Good evening. Happy New Year's, everybody. I want to welcome everybody to a new year. I also want to, this is the second Zoom I've been on. Today. I just got off of Zoom. And I just want to take a second, if I will. A lot of times we open up with meditation and things, but this time I want to open up on reflection. Everybody knows that 2020 was a very difficult year. One of the things that it started out with in 26th of January with the shocking and untimely death of Kobe and his daughter and 7 others. And it just escalated from there. When we started right around there and found out about COVID, and there's a lot of people that we had to say goodbye to otherwise prematurely, whether for this virus. So I just want to take a second to give all of the ones that we lost in our family and loved ones, the ones that touched our hearts that we knew, and those that we didn't. And also first responders. And when I say first responders, I don't mean the obvious first responders, because I think the teachers that are first responders, because no matter what you ascertain to be as an adult and make your bread and your livelihood, you have to go through a formal or informal education, which could be formally done through the education system or through people that you looked up to in your neighborhood, starting with your parents. So I just want to give a moment of silence, a brief moment of silence for those that we lost, and also for those that continue to lead the charge and continue to teach in this struggle that we call Earth. I want to thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Brother Mark.
All right. Thank you, brother. So usually what we've been doing for the last few shows is we have a cultural piece, some music, something that helps us promote health and healthy habits to stop the spread of COVID. But tonight we're just going to jump into a short video. It's produced by Dr. Michael Greger. You can go to his website and you can check it out. And then after that, we're just going to start the conversation. So without further ado, let me get to that. And here we go. Okay. And let me put it in this format and make sure I mute my mic so it doesn't create any feedback or unnecessary echoes.
A review published in the December 2019 issue of the journal Infectious Disease Clinics of North America concluded the SARS epidemic demonstrated that novel, highly pathogenic, highly disease-causing viruses crossing the animal-human barrier remain a major threat to global health security. Little did the authors know that by the date of publication, just such a virus was brewing. It will not be surprising if new coronaviruses emerge in the near future. Read another review a few months before. It is highly likely that future SARS or MERS-like coronavirus outbreaks will originate from bats, and there's an increased probability that this will occur in China. These warnings aren't new, dating back more than a decade. The presence of a large reservoir of SARS-like coronaviruses in bats, together with the culture of eating exotic mammals in southern China, is a time bomb. A time bomb that just went off. Now I hope you can understand how Dr. Lee's 7 SARS cases confirmed forewarning was so ominous. That's why I did the last video about SARS, because it gives some context. It wasn't the SARS coronavirus he found, though, the cause of SARS, severe acute respiratory syndrome, but instead a virus that would come to be known as SARS coronavirus 2, the cause of COVID-19, short for Coronavirus Disease 2019. Before it became known as SARS-CoV-2, though, it was just the Wuhan seafood market pneumonia virus. According to the director of the Chinese CDC, ground zero for the COVID-19 pandemic was the Hunan market in Wuhan, China, where most of the first human cases could be traced back. Described as the largest wholesale seafood market in central China, the Hunan market reportedly also sold 75 species of wild animals. If you want to see what that part of the market looked like, you can go to bit.ly/Hunan market, but I'm not going to show the photos because some may find them disturbing. Although there are fish coronaviruses, 90% of the samples that turned up positive for the virus were found in the section of the 500,000 square foot seafood market where those photos were taken, the part that trafficked in exotic animals sold for food. The fact that the genetic sequences of the viruses obtained from some of the earliest human victims were 99.9% identical, despite the rapid mutation rate of coronaviruses, suggests the current pandemic originated within a very short period from a single source. Although there have been documented reports of the original SARS coronavirus escaping from laboratories, the fact that the COVID-19 coronavirus was optimized for binding to human cells in a novel way suggests that the new pandemic we now face was not made in some laboratory, but rather through natural means, though to lock in the necessary mutations, the animal host would probably have to have a high population density. The new coronavirus appears to share a common ancestor with the original SARS virus, for which it's about 80% identical, but it's more than 95% identical with a coronavirus found in a bat in 2013. The current thinking is that the COVID-19 virus originated in bats, but then jumped to humans only after passing through an intermediate host. The pandemic emerged in winter, after all, when most bat species in Wuhan are hibernating, and no bats were reportedly found at the Hunan market. There were labs in the proximity of the market where bat viruses might have escaped, but the virus was found in environmental samples taken directly from the market. Unfortunately, the market was closed and cleared before the animals themselves were tested, complicating the forensic search for the source. In the case of SARS, the intermediate host between bats and human-to-human transmission was the civet. In MERS, it was camels. What was the intermediate host for COVID-19? The leading candidate for the stepping stone civet of the current outbreak is the pangolin. Also known as scaly anteaters, pangolins look like a cross between a sloth and a pine cone. But between the demand for their meat as a delicacy and their scales for use in traditional Chinese medicine, pangolins are the most trafficked mammal in the world. Pangolins are served in high-end restaurants in China. Once the order is placed, the animal may be hammered until it is unconscious, and then slaughtered in front of the customers as a guarantee of the meat's freshness. The blood is drained, and usually given to the customer to bring home or use to make pangolin blood fried rice. Coronaviruses from 2 separate batches of diseased pangolins being smuggled into China were found to be about 90% identical with the COVID-19 virus. Not only is the pangolin the only other mammal found to be infected with SARS-CoV-2-like viruses, but the critical receptor binding region of the pangolin coronavirus spike protein is virtually identical to the human strain. Work is still underway, but whichever the animal was, that one meal, that one medicine may have ended up costing humanity a few $1 trillion and a few million lives. Given the role exotic animal trafficking appears to have played in the current global health crisis, some of the international scientific community have called for a ban on the sale of wild animals and the closure of live animal markets. Even infectious disease experts within Wuhan started calling for completely eradicating wildlife trading. On January 26, 2020, the Chinese government responded, announcing a total ban on the trade and sale of wild animal meat, reportedly shutting down or quarantining almost 20,000 wildlife farms across 7 Chinese provinces, though the ban is only set to be temporary. After the SARS outbreak in 2003, Chinese officials enacted a similar ban on the trade of civet cats, but within months, the ban was lifted, and the animals were back on the menu. Much of the wildlife trade was already illegal in China in the first place, with flaunted bans dating back more than a decade. The Chinese pangolin, for example, is officially considered a critically endangered species. That's part of the draw, though, as a serving of extra rare meat may project prestige and wealth. A thriving black market already exists and could potentially be driven further underground by government action. The ultimate solution, wrote a group of Chinese scientists, lies in changing people's minds about what is delicious, trendy, prestigious, or healthy to eat. Having spent the bulk of my professional life trying to get people to eat more healthfully to prevent chronic disease, I can certainly relate. In the unlikely event the current ban was to be made permanent and was enforced effectively, there remains a glaring loophole. The ban exempts the use of wild animals for traditional Chinese medicine, so while it's currently illegal to eat pangolin meat, it's not illegal to eat other pangolin parts. How ironic that the pandemic appears to have arisen in a market selling remedies purported to promote immunity and longevity. Pangolin blood is said to promote circulation. For only about $30 a pound, anyone can go online and buy Chinese bat feces to treat their eye disorders. While the drying of excrement would presumably inactivate coronavirus, the trade and handling of live and recently killed bats for their use in traditional remedies could infect people directly, or certainly introduce opportunities for cross-infection with susceptible animal hosts. Now, it's easy for xenophobic Westerners to condemn cultures consuming rhino horns, tiger bones, and pangolin scales, or 21st century manifestations such as mukbangs, live-streaming broadcasts of people eating bat soup and the like. But, as I discuss in my new book, the last pandemic, the 2009 H1N1 swine flu virus, arose not from some backwater wet market in Asia, but rather was largely made in the USA from industrial pig operations in the United States. So for the emergence of SARS-CoV-3, we may need look no further than our own plates.
This. Okay, so I'm going to do a 2-second recap of the video, and I hope I can do it some justice. But basically, what Dr. Greger does, and I have his book here. It's called How to Survive a Pandemic. And this is a great book because about a third of it is the references, right? About a third of the book, it actually tells you where he gets his research from. Another book that I want to highlight tonight is also called Manufacturing Consent, right? And so when we watch CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, what we're doing is getting brainwashed, right? And so what we have to do is start doing the research ourselves. And nowadays, maybe you don't want to read a book this thick, but you know what? There's audio books, so you don't have to read the whole thing. You can hear it. Somebody will read it for you. And also, we have to establish consistent media, alternative media that we can trust, right? If you come here to the People's TV, we're going to do research and we're going to provide the best information we can. If you go to the Real News Network on YouTube, if you go to Ralph and Betty's show on Blog Talk Radio, if you go to Omowale Adewale Black Veg Fest on Instagram, if you go to the Black Agenda Report on the internet, there's people doing the research for you. So there's really no reason why, like, for example, I spent like half the summer trying to debunk conspiracy theories, right? And it was weird how all those conspiracy theories sounded exactly like what Trump was saying. Exactly what Trump was saying, except they didn't mention Trump's name, right? So I had to spend hours and hours, and a good thing I'm a teacher, so I wasn't working over the summer, hours and hours and hours just getting information for people, getting the sources for people, getting videos like the one we just played, so that people would not make bad decisions, right? And so remember, the enemy doesn't always have to convince you of something. All the enemy has to do is create doubt in your mind. And then you become paralyzed, and then you make wrong choices that then jeopardize you, your family, and the community. So in this short video, Dr. Greger talks about where coronaviruses come from. And I didn't even make the connection with SARS and MERS that came before it. It's been all linked. It's all linked, right? And these viruses get to mutate. They start, let's say, with a bat, and then they go to a mammal, which then jumps to humans, because anytime you have crowded, unsanitary conditions for people or animals, you're going to create germs that are going to be devastating, whether it's bacteria, whether it's viruses. So I'm going to bring on our guest for this segment because I think I've said enough and shown enough. And I hope I did the video justice. And if I didn't, people on the chat could add things that I didn't add, right? And so let me bring on our guests, and I'm going to introduce them. Bill, I don't think I got to introduce you. I think we good on that.
Okay.
If people don't know you by now, man,
They'll never know me.
That's what I'm saying. They ain't been watching the show. But let me get this information here. Let's start with, I'm going to start with Sister Laurie Kim. And so Sister Laurie Kim Alexander has dedicated her life to working for social and environmental justice, specifically organizing around centering justice for LGBTQIA+, Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities. She uses her work in biology, anthropology, and environmental education in a synergistic way to forward Black liberation. She sees veganism as a central platform for decolonization, food justice, and combating environmental racism to galvanize the struggle to liberate all marginalized beings. And she said it was going to be a long intro, but I don't think it was long. I think it was just right. So let me introduce Sister Judy. And here we go. Judy Sheridan Gonzalez. She's an ER nurse in the Bronx for over 30 years and president of the New York State Nurses Association, a lifetime activist around issues of social justice. Thank you all for being here. Some of you saw pieces of the video, heard pieces of the video. I hope my summary of it did justice to what Dr. Michael Greger was doing. But in this first segment, I felt it important to debunk a lot of these conspiracy theories, because the United States, there are segments in the United States that want to go to war with China, right? They want to blame China for everything that happens in this country. And so one of the things that they've invented is this creation of, it came out of a lab. So I don't know who would like to speak first, but the floor is open. Should I? Okay, let's go with Laurie Kim.
So it's really hard with zoonotic diseases, right? And when we talk, I unfortunately I couldn't hear the video, so I'm not sure what was said there. So if I'm repeating anything, sorry about that. But zoonotic diseases are kind of classified as between animals and humans, right? But really, humans are mammals. So it makes sense that if there are diseases that would spread between mammals, we would get them as well. So, but there's a lot of debate as to where they came from. There's no way that something like COVID would come from a lab. It's easier to say that than to say, well, the overcrowded, filthy factory farming system that crunches under the bodies of humans and non-humans alike created this pandemic. When you have conditions like that, what happens is that viruses can recombine their DNA really easy. And so you have this continuation of these really virulent diseases. You have these animals being injected with antibiotics. And so you get, antibiotic resistant bacteria, all kinds of pathogens in a system like that. And then it's easy to say that it comes from a lab, because then we can say, oh, it's something that was manufactured. It's not possible that what we're actually doing, a system that we're buying into, would do that. Or it's easy to say, oh, wildlife did it, when actually they're just a vector, just some, a being that carries disease just like us. And that's really not the case.
Yeah, let me add. I totally agree with the sister. I think it's really can occur in labs. There's lots of experimentation that does go on. I think the point is really well taken, that the damage we're doing to our planet, in addition to the factory farming, the robbing of animals of their forests, they migrate, they move over. And why bats have had such a bad reputation throughout history is because they're flying mammals. Very few mammals, I think it's the only mammal that really flies. And because they fly and they're mammals, they can carry very minute particles in their excrement to other areas. And because of the warming, creates a much more hospitable environment for these viruses, bacteria, and fungi to exist. In addition to the deforestation, you are seeing things like this happening more and more. So the destruction of our planet, we versus say the climate change, because create conditions, these organisms from Zika to Ebola to SARS, all these different kind of things to occur. So totally possible that this can happen in labs. But we really face back contributing these dangerous organisms.
Thank you. Bill, did you want to add anything to this part of the conversation?
Yeah, just a little bit. First I want to start off with a question. And I was listening to is based on my interpretation, what I listened to on that tape. I'm listening to Judy talk about bats are flying mammals, and it's quite understandable that they will carry diseases, just like Laurie Kim said, we're humans and we carry diseases too. But was I correct when it said that the bats, they do get a negative stigma associated with them? But they also said in that piece that the bats feces is good for curing eye disease,
Okay.
eye disorder. Did I hear that correctly?
What it is that in Chinese traditional medicine,
I didn't say.
no, Judy, he's talking about what was said on the video.
In the video.
Yeah. And so in the video, it talks about how.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear
not
it.
only
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, not only are different parts believed to have different medicinal qualities, but also animal feces is sometimes thought to have medicinal qualities. And so what he was talking about was dried bat feces that you can buy on the internet. And if you rub the bat feces on your eyes, it's supposed to give you some, act like a medicine for your eye. So what he was talking about, not that he agrees with that, it's a common belief in China that bat feces has medicinal qualities.
Okay. All right. So I just wanted that cleared up, and thank you for clearing that up for me. What is the biggest? I got a question though. This is my own question. What is the biggest myth surrounding COVID-19? What is the most common, one of the most common myth that is surrounding that? That Judy or Lori Kim, if you care to answer.
Mute. Okay. Go ahead. I was trying to say, go ahead, Judy, please.
Okay. Judy, you want to take it? I can't hear her.
Yeah, I can't hear her either.
No, I think you're freezing, Judy. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I'll just say honestly, one of the biggest
I don't hear.
Oh, you're here? You got that?
Yeah. I think she has a weak signal, and so it's interrupting what she's saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I will just say the biggest one that I've heard. Okay, we're good now.
Judy, can you speak?
Yeah. Well, she has a great smile. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah.
Sometimes I hear things. Sometimes I hear things like. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me or no?
Yes.
You could hear? Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's any one myth. I think we live in a society in which are seen as fact, where what used to be breaking is seen as news. I mean, it's pretty scary. And like I said, if you're hanging around with Trump people, you think that COVID is a plot by China to take over the world. And if you hang around with people who watch CNN, think something else. And if you hang around with other people, they think it's a plot by the U.S. government and the CIA to, experiment. I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty much a materialist. I try to figure out what I can based on when I know that there are facts, and I can speculate about other stuff. What I do know is that we have this, horrendous disease that has just decimated our population, particularly the most vulnerable population, indigenous people and people of color. And that's what I know. And I work firsthand with it. I know that. And, that is horrifying and frightening. And when people, anyone who died of COVID, I mean, I've seen hundreds of people die of COVID. And I think that that's very real. And speculate about a lot of things. How do we save the population from this disease? I'm sorry to not answer. That's how I see it.
Okay, thank you. You wanted to add to that, Lori Kim?
I think that was beautiful. I think that's so true. That it's very hard to pick out just one. When you first asked that question, I thought, well, the one the question that you asked before, about whether or not this was something that was fabricated to cull the population and X, Y, and Z, that one is really detrimental because it moves us away from the true issues at hand, right? Um, the issues that stem from colonialism and capitalism. And so when that happens, we're in serious jeopardy of losing sight of the goal, which is liberation and to live, right?
Thank you. Okay. We have another guest speaker. Uh, uh, Tell me if I mispronounce your name or pronounce it right. Samara, is that pronounced right or
Samira.
Samira? Okay. Mark, you want to give her an intro?
Yes, yes. I've been trying to get her on. We've been struggling this whole time. Sister Laurie Kim, I brought you backstage so I could come on and do the introduction, but we're going to bring you right on because the next segment of the show is perfect. This is like Sister Samira's perfect timing because we're going to talk about how the U.S. has dealt with COVID versus how it's been dealt with in Cuba. So let me do the introduction. And I want us to welcome Dr. Samira Mifatu Adri, graduated summa cum laude from the Latin American School of Medicine, class of 2020. Congratulations. She is
Congratulations.
from Gaithersburg, Maryland, by way of Accra, Ghana. She currently works for the Interreligious Foundation for Community Organization, IFCO Pastors for Peace, as the program coordinator for the IFCO Elam Scholarship Program. She will speak about how Cuba has successfully responded to catastrophic events in general and how that has influenced their successful control of COVID-19. And that's super important. I teach that in high school because everybody thinks, oh, it's just COVID is out of control. There's nothing we can do. And that is so false. And that's because people aren't seeing successful models the way we see it when we look at Cuba. So thank you, Sister Samira, for being on. And I'm going to jump back off, get back to my technical work back here, and put Sister Laurie Kim back on. Thank you.
Can you tell us what your name
Thank you.
is?
Samira?
Right.
Yeah, my name means refreshing breeze or a trustworthy companion in Arabic.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
you're welcome.
So if you like, you can talk in terms of the relationship of Cuba's success versus the world. I know that they've been very successful. I know you probably know a lot more than me, but I did do a little research on why they were successful. And if you want to elaborate, by all means, or whatever else you want to add to the conversation, take it away.
Sure. Thank you all for having me on this show. I apologize. I've been having serious technical difficulties, and even now, I don't even know what I look like on this camera because I have to flip my computer back because it seems like the front camera wasn't working for this. So I don't know what it looks like, and I can hear you guys faintly. So I apologize if I do end up repeating something that you guys have mentioned in the show. But like Brother Mark said, I'm here to give the perspective, the Cuban perspective on how COVID has been confronted and controlled up till today. And for me, it's an honor because I studied in Cuba for the last 7 years, and I've been able to engage with Cuban people who I hold dear to my heart. And it's been a gift to really be in that society and immersed in a country where we hear a lot of false propaganda about what is going on. So one of the pillars and the strengths of the Cuban government and the Cuban people has been their primary focus in primary care, as like the pillar of maintaining the health of their society. And this is a commitment that the government made from the onset of the Cuban Revolution, by prioritizing the community and the family as the units that actually are, the most important elements to ensuring the health of a population. So this dates back to, as far back as their participation in the World Health Organization's Alma-Ata conference in 1978, where it was decided as a global decision that primary health care was going to be the objective for everybody in order to attain, health for all. And Cuba stuck to that promise. But going beyond that, even before that, Cuba had already created this national defense program because it's an island and for many years had always been heavily hit and impacted by natural disasters, namely tropical storms and hurricanes. So in 1962, the government enacted this civil defense program, which is really the strength of it. The core strength of it comes from the grassroots level, comes from the block to block participation of what you call the CDRs, or the committees of defense of the revolution. And these are basically block committees made up of maybe, I would say on average, 20 or 30 families that come together to make sure that they protect themselves as individuals and as families, and their, all of their livelihood, which includes their property and everything else. So this national defense program was enacted from the top down, but it really functions from the bottom up. So you have your alert system, which is transmitted by the mass, the media, which is controlled by the state, and they're able to deliver, information on time, ahead of time, to prepare the population about the impending disaster. So everybody is aware, everybody's on the same page. But not only that, these committees are made up of ordinary citizens who have to sit down and decide how to organize themselves and help each other ensure that everybody is safe. So if you know that your neighbor maybe is living in a place where it's low-lying and would be impacted by flooding, everybody would organize to go there first and move whatever furniture or belongings they have, evacuate them out of the place, or put their belongings at a higher ground, clear trees that may cause electrical wires to trip up, seal windows, make sure that the place was safe and that human beings were safe. And it's the emphasis is preserving human life. And that, I think, is the most important thing that I took away from understanding and studying the system in terms of disaster preparedness. It played into the medical preparedness as well, because the doctors there are also functioning by block. You have a doctor attending to maximum maybe 100 families. So that makes the doctor able to know their population and know who the vulnerable people are within that population and help prioritize as well. But it's not just about the doctor. The nurse is also, the family nurse is also a critical component. And that is somebody also who's from the same neighborhood, the same block. So these are some of the members of the society who everybody knows, everybody lives with, tends to. Usually it's somebody within the neighborhood that's attending to you. So it's not, there's that familiarity, and that already, establishes trust, and it goes on. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's not about, your qualification being your right to have an authority over other people. It's the fact that everybody stands in solidarity with each other and is preoccupied with preserving each other's lives. So that not only plays out in how they prevent, to date, many deaths from disasters, because in the last 20 years, they've confronted 30 great disasters. And in those 30 great disasters, they've been 20 hurricanes and 10 tropical storms. And it's been, the total of deaths have been 54 people have died in the last 20 years. If we start talking about disasters that the U.S. has confronted in the last 20 years, I'm pretty sure the numbers are not going to look anything like that. And it's because of the focus. The focus is about preservation of life versus preservation of profits. A lot of the times it's really about profits on this side. And it's just a concept that they have tried not only to implement in their disaster preparedness, but again, I say in the COVID aspect, especially from day one, they alerted the population about the confirmed cases, which was March 11th, were the first confirmed cases of COVID on the island. And every day since then, they gave detailed reports about how many tests have been realized in the population, how many people have been affected, how many people are suspected. And they have systematically isolated not just people who are confirmed cases, but suspected cases, as well as contacts of suspected cases and contacts of contacts. So it's an aggressiveness about preserving the life and preserving the health of the population that is unparalleled, because there are consequences. If you don't feel like masking or social distancing is important, you will pay a fine, you will pay a consequence, you might even pay jail time for not following those public health measures. So there's a level of aggressiveness in preserving life that we witnessed on the island while I was there, from that whole time that things started in March until I graduated and left in August. It was very much serious. At a point in April, they closed down the borders. And so that even limited their control and focused the intention on making sure that the population was healthy. And it was an all hands on deck type of strategy. Medical students were heavily involved in hunting, as we would say, hunting the cases, the COVID cases, making sure we knew who had contacts with any confirmed cases, and making sure that that circle of infection stayed very close, very small. So I don't want to talk more than I'm supposed to, but I'd be happy to elaborate more. It's a lot of information, but
yeah, it is a lot.
At least I wanted to start.
Absolutely. We appreciate it, because I remember when I was working at Harlem Hospital, I was there when they started taking beds out of the hospital and started switching most of the operations, or most of the investment was going into ambulatory care, where elective procedures were being done. The hospital could bill greater, or the insurance company obviously was involved and could make big profits. And so when you have a pandemic, yeah, they don't have the capacity. They don't have the ICU beds. They don't have the equipment that they need, because everything is geared towards a type of revolving door healthcare where, you know, you have to pay. Money is given to the hospital. People make money. Insurance companies make money. And so, right, so they're not ready for a pandemic. And if you've noticed in the United States, and Judy could probably speak better to this, they haven't reinvested in public health care. And they haven't given the people Medicare for all. In fact, Joe Biden said if the Congress approved it, he would veto it. So I don't know, Judy, if you want to jump in now and talk about the U.S. response and the Cuban response.
Sure. I mean, you know, we did. Do you want to say that now? You want to talk now?
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, okay. Sure. I switched my system so you can hear me better now. Is this better? Better
yeah,
audio?
we can hear you better. There's less
You're
breaking up less.
Anyway, we really have no public health. We have no public health infrastructure here in this country. The little bit of public health infrastructure we had, say 30, 40, or 50 years ago has been slowly eviscerated. And we've taken nurses to Cuba to see the health system there. We also have disaster teams that go to the areas. I went 5 or 6 times to Puerto Rico after Irma and Maria, to the Virgin Islands, Haiti after the earthquake, and to New Orleans after Katrina. And you really see the difference. We don't go to Cuba to disaster because they have their own relief system. It's perfect. What they don't have are resources, and they don't have money, and they don't have materials because of the criminal blockade. But they do have people, and everything that the sister doctor said is so incredibly true and fabulous to see. It's wonderful for us who practice here to see real medicine, real nursing take place in a nation. But what we have is nothing. We have a system that is absolute failure. Hurricane Sandy, where about 1,000 of us in my union volunteered in the Rockaways and inland and England. What we found was a total non-system. Wall Street was up in 2 days, if you recall, functioning, but there are still people that don't have their homes and didn't get their FEMA money since the hurricane. So we don't have a system, whether it's for a man-made disaster or a natural disaster or pandemic. And what we saw during this pandemic was an absolute failure of every single system that should have been in place to prepare, to prevent. The PPE issue is terrible. We've lost so many health workers. We've lost frontline workers. And now that we have the resurgence in COVID again, which we do have in New York, they have not learned anything. They don't work with the frontline workers to figure out what needs to happen to take care of our patients. I just had an exposure on Saturday. Now I have to get tested again. We have to get tested a lot. We don't have a good protective system, and people are still getting ill. And certainly, as the doctor said, there's people aren't taking seriously the wearing of masks. I sent you that PowerPoint, right, Mark?
Yeah.
I think it's a really helpful thing for people to see. You can feel free to share it about how we at least can take care of ourselves in terms of ventilation and mask protection. But it's night and day what goes on in Cuba and what goes on over here and in our colonies as well. Much worse in our colonies.
All right, thank you. I mean, this piece is important. I think that there's so much misinformation going out, and because people got to know, there are countries that have this under control, and that we can do the same here. I remember when Hurricane Sandy hit New York City, what myself and some other people started watching was old Vietnam War videos, where it shows you the Vietnamese, because they were organized as a nation, as a community, were using bicycles to transport supplies to support the war effort. And FEMA hadn't even got out to Red Hook, Brooklyn, which was surrounded by flooded water. And so what we did, we organized folks throughout Manhattan to get on bicycles, load them up with water, load them up with food, load them up with medical supplies. And we took these bicycles all the way from Harlem. We took them all the way out to Red Hook, Brooklyn. And these bicycles were sustaining a lot of people in the projects over there, because the elevators weren't working. So a lot of people with disabilities and illnesses couldn't even come down to the first floor. So our comrades and sisters and brothers lugged up to these high-rise projects water, and the medicine people, and the food. Sorry about that feedback. And the food that people needed, right? And so when you look at Cuba and you look at these countries where there's a lot of organization, grassroots organizing, in the United States, we have a block association. And the block association doesn't take its task to make sure that everybody on the block is safe. They want to throw a block party, which is great. But we have to use these mechanisms, like what the sister's saying, these committees in defense of the revolution, just like we took the idea of using bicycles to deliver food and supplies to people in Red Hook, Brooklyn, after Hurricane Sandy, as examples of what we can do to save lives, right? And the more we can do these things in an organized way, and Judy, I think the PowerPoint you shared, I'm definitely going to share it, because there's also this other thing about, well, there's nothing I can do, COVID is too big. But no, even in a horrible situation, our action can change things, right? It can save lives. And so, I really appreciate what you just said. But what I want to do at this point is I want to switch over now. Okay, so the United States is going for a profit over people model. And all these companies have been making billions and billions of dollars, while over 3,000 people are dying every day in the United States. Meanwhile, in China, they have no new cases. In Cuba, they've controlled it. It's really criminal what's happening in this country. But I want to talk about now, give some time to talking about vaccines. Vaccines, just to put it out there, as a kid, I would travel to Dominican Republic, and I would see kids who suffer from polio, right? And their bones were displaced. They look, it was horrible how they couldn't walk. It was hard for them to do anything. These kids who had suffered from polio, and and because they weren't using the polio vaccine, they didn't have it, and so vaccines have helped millions and millions of people survive and live and not suffer from these terrible diseases. But there are a lot of questions about this. I think this particular vaccine for COVID, and I don't know, Sister Laurie Kim or Sister Judy, I don't know if y'all want to, which one wants to go first to address it. But, it's very perplexing. And in the news, again, mainstream media gives you so much confusing information that it's hard for our people to make informed decisions. So what do y'all think?
Take it away, Sister Laurie.
Honestly, I was going to defer to you again on this one because you're working directly in the field. I really was excited to hear from you about this because I do feel like there's a lot of folks we're not getting a lot of good information, right? And so it seems like I'm the only one with the stable Wi-Fi right now.
Well, you and me, you know what? I mean, what I do is I use my Ethernet cable, and I plug it into my computer. Everybody else is, I guess they're using Wi-Fi and is just not strong enough,
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, I have Judy backstage now, so.
Okay, great. Okay, I'll continue. But what I was going to say is that
I got knocked off. I don't know what this is.
Okay, well, I'm glad you're back.
I missed what you just said. I got knocked off.
Yeah, she was actually throwing the question back on you, and then you got cut off.
So, yeah, but that's fine.
I always try to defer to other people because I talk too much. But
no,
if you want,
do not.
I can certainly talk about
the vaccine.
Take
up all the space.
Yeah. So here's the thing with the vaccine. I mean, I totally believe in vaccines. I think you're right, Brother Mark. You go to other countries, or even you see in our poor communities what happens when people aren't vaccinated. Even most recently, the measles epidemic for these Hasidic communities that weren't immunizing their children, and it spread to other areas. Seeing what happens even with measles. A lot of us say, oh, in childhood we had measles, it was okay. But measles can do really bad things. All these diseases can really cause problems. And while I absolutely believe that our bolstering our immune system through the way we eat, the way we live, the types of leisure activities we have, the stresses we have in our lives, all those things are significant. But there are bacteria, there are viruses, there are transmittable diseases that can be prevented with vaccines. The problem with this vaccine, rightly so, people have concerns that there's a political component, there's a profit component. You don't feel comfortable trusting the rapidity in which it was researched and put out. But I've participated in clinical trials, and what people need to know is clinical trials involve human beings who volunteer to be in clinical trials. So it's not that they were testing it on mice and bang, they're giving it to people. I think the other concern is early release of vaccines, like what happened with the hepatitis B vaccine. Initially, it used it had a human component in it, and there were some complications. The later vaccine was safer. So I guess some people are thinking, I want to wait for the safer one. But I think that a lot of the fears are also irrational. And having done research, I had to do extensive research. And I felt really comfortable knowing that there were like 13 or 14 organizations and countries that came out with very similar formulas, very similar research, very similar outcomes. It gave me a little bit more confidence that it wasn't just Pfizer wanting to make $1 million, but in fact, scientists throughout the world, and there are scientists in these corporations, even though we hate these corporations, they have scientists and they do research. They came out with very similar results. So I did get the vaccine. Like I said, I know what COVID does. I see already the long-term sequelae. People who survive COVID, they have other complications later on that they didn't know that they would have, particularly vascular complications. Your vascular means anything in your blood that goes to any other organ. So people have serious problems from COVID. And having seen the deaths and having lived through still not even be able to process what we saw in the spring here, where we had one patient, then we had 10 patients, then we had 1,000 patients, and we were rolling out bodies by the hundreds every day from my own hospital, to the point that we had to close our windows so we wouldn't see the pathway of the bodies going into the trucks. Nobody should have to go through that again. And there's a way to probably or possibly or well prevent it, I'm all for it. And I think that it's very important that we educate people about all the facts related to the vaccine, not just hearsay, not just Facebook, not just conspiracy theories. And it really does disturb me that so many people in our community don't want to get vaccinated, because I think this is not the only solution. There are many other things that people need to do, but the vaccine is a way out. And obviously, I support the vaccine. I'm sure there'll be better models developed over time, but I'm not afraid to be one of the first participants.
Right, and so you took the vaccine, right? And
I did. I had my first dose. I have to get a second dose to give me more immunity.
Right,
You
and
need 2 doses. All the except for one sec. There's one vaccine where you don't. There's one trajectory that they followed where I think you can use just one vaccine. For the Pfizer, I took the Pfizer one, and you need 2. You have 3 weeks apart.
and what's
The first
the
one
story?
gives you potentially 50%, 40% immunity initially,
And what's
and the
the
final
story?
one gives you about 90%.
When did she take it? What day did you take it? When did you take the
What?
vaccine? When did you take it? In December? December what?
December
14th?
22nd, I think. December, was it? Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. I have to look at my phone. I'm going to get my second dose on January 12th. So whatever 3 weeks, minus 3 weeks.
Okay, 3 weeks from there. Okay, can I play devil's advocate? I want to
Sure.
I want to go back for a minute for Cuba and the success, because once Mark told me that one of the things that we was going to do was compare Cuba to the United States. So I did a little research, and one of the things that they said that Cuba has they have free universal health, and they said that that their doctors travel globally, and they take their global experience back home for them, and their doctor physician per population is the greatest in the world in terms of people versus the number of physicians that they have in Cuba. So that would lend itself to a greater downturn as far as people totally getting sick, and they also back it up with their with their pregnancy success in their pregnancy instead of their same like in Canada. So I mean, one of the things that we did establish is people over profit. I mean, profit over people. I stand to be corrected. And then you go with the Eastern modality versus the Western modality, and one is about saving lives, one is about saving coins. And when you talk now, I'm gonna fast forward to what you're talking about, Judy, in terms of taking the shot. Hey, it seems like it's an unprecedented fast track to get these like never before. And I'm 60. In my lifetime, I've never seen a vaccine come out so quick. I know that they have different phases. They have a phase 3 testing, and I also understand that in the African American community and people of brown brown people and people that's on the lower economic rung of economics affordability, and it was reflected in the treatment that they get. It's reflected in the basically, let's say, the treatment. So, and United States history of using us as guinea pigs, whether it was the Tuskegee experiment, whether it was the LSD experiment with the Vietnam War, they didn't care what your ethnicity was. They cared about your IQ. So all of those gave people reason for pause. And I will go back to say, when you talk about these vaccines, what is the normal timeline? And all of a sudden you can get it in less than a year. That is something that's unprecedented. That's unprecedented. The speed in which it's coming in is unprecedented. And even I'm listening to you, and you're saying, maybe down the road something more effective might come along. Well, people that look like me, and I'm not a spokesperson for African American, but being that that's basically who I conversate with because that's who I grew up around, and we have the same complaints and the same um, arguments, basically based on the complaint of the United States government that's been perpetuated day in, decade in, decade out. We're going to tend to be skeptical. So I mean, you need people to take this vaccine, but you can understand why it's a great number of us that's skeptical.
Right. So let me just read this from Brother David Cruz has been putting information in the chat, and I just want to be able to shout out and share one of what he's saying, Bill, because I think he's right on target with what you're saying. He's saying many are skeptical about vaccine because of the horrible track record of the pharmaceutical industry. Drugs and malpractice is the third largest killer in the U.S. So, and Judy, we're glad you're here because you took the vaccine, right? And you can give us some information, but and so this is a good format for this kind of conversation.
Yeah, just let me say, I mean, totally, we know that 1/3 of all Puerto Rican women were sterilized without their consent. We know who's been experimented on. When we look at Tuskegee, we look at the disparities today. Who died from COVID? 3 times as many Black people as white people. Look at all the diseases that exist. Everybody, I mean, it's absolutely understandable that there's skepticism. What I'm saying is that I wasn't comfortable with it until I did the research from around the world. Cuba's supporting the vaccine. Countries around the world are supporting the vaccine. Vaccines prior to this, people support vaccine. I mean, the thing about this vaccine is there were the emergency use authorizations that were passed in this country, and also in other countries, they did speed it up. But there was also a lot of technology that existed that didn't exist before that allowed the vaccine to develop. But I'm not judging anybody for being skeptical. I completely understand it. Initially, I was totally opposed to it. That was why I felt I had to research and see what other countries were doing, particularly a country like Cuba that I respect and trust. And that's where I drew my conclusion. In addition, I willingly would volunteer to be an early recipient because that's how we learn what happens. I've done it before. I've participated in trials. I don't trust drug companies. There's 400,000 deaths every year in hospitals as a result of drug errors. And that doesn't even include the other problems that emerge in other cases. This is just drug errors. And we believe those are only the reported ones. It's the highest killer if you really looked at the real facts, because people cover it up for death in this country. Well, COVID has now surpassed it. But so that skepticism is totally valid. I just saying that in addition to, in spite of all that, I felt comfortable enough to take the vaccine. I would never force it. I don't believe it should be mandatory at all, but I do believe people should do the research, and completely agree with your analysis of what the history has been.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear on that.
I think this piece is important, right? How do you know something is real is you cannot only listen to people in this country. You got to have an international perspective. I mean, when the pandemic first hit in New York and Fauci was talking about nobody needs a mask, the first thing I did was go out and get a mask because everybody in China was wearing a damn mask, and everybody in Japan and everybody in South Korea and everybody, they were all, I said, well, shit, excuse my language. If you don't need a mask, then why are millions of people wearing a mask? And then it turns out later, Fauci was like, oh, I just said that because I didn't want people to buy masks and then they wouldn't be around for healthcare workers. And I said, really? Really? So, my wife was working, and, we know other people in the healthcare profession. And I'm always sending them research from other countries, from Cuba, from, South Korea, from Singapore, from Australia. I said, don't worry about what the CDC is saying. Read these things in places where they're saving lives and they're controlling the pandemic. So I'm glad you said that, Judy. Is very important because, Cuba has been so firm in its solidarity throughout Latin America, throughout Africa. Cuba, the Battle of Quito Carnavale in West Africa is what brought Mandela out of prison, right? So Cuba, Fidel Castro, when he came to the United States, met with Malcolm at the Teresa Hotel, right? Because there was no place downtown that would give Fidel a place to sleep. But Malcolm hooked it up and they met. So my thing is always, we have to be very skeptical of these profit before people institutions in this country. But we have allies. We have allies around the world who really care about human life. And so we have to stay connected to what they're doing and then organize here to save lives. So I'm very happy you said that. Would anybody else
want to jump in on it? Yeah, I want to jump in because where's the last example of the government and the crisis that we ran into prior to Sandy? It was 9/11. Christy Todd Whitman represented the government. She went down there with this paper map and talked about the air quality. And how many people have died since 9/11 that was first responders, that was construction workers such as myself? I lost a lot of comrades that went down there because they trusted the voice of the government. And I'm sitting there looking at her as a construction worker saying, there is no way on God's green earth that is good health, that is good air down there, and that mass is acceptable. And people have paid with their life. And years later, matter of fact, decades later, she's had come to admit that was false information. So when you turn to the government, I mean, even if you look at the Western and the Eastern modality, you got high blood pressure. You go to a doctor out here, what they say, here, take this pill, take it to the day you die to regulate your blood pressure. It may kill your kidneys, but it regulates your blood pressure. But if you go to Asia and whatnot, they say, okay, what's creating your blood pressure? What's your symptom? They treat the symptoms. You come over here and you talk that kind of talk, and the doctors over here, they get offended by you. Of course, know why? It cuts into their bottom line. So it's always going to be skepticism as long as you got the 1% ruling. So they do have a place they do have a system of order in place. It's called capitalism. And until we do away, look at that right now. We're talking about a stimulus check. We will send billions of dollars to multi-million-dollar corporations, but we want to argue about sending $2,000 per person. And if you make over $90,000, they don't even want to give you the check. Ask me how I know.
I just have a quick thing. First of all, right on for what you just said, but Samira wanted to say something.
Samira?
And then I have some. Yeah, Samira is back and wants to say something, and then I have a small thing to say as well.
Okay, I don't see Samira. Where is she?
Oh, I don't know. She was just here.
Okay.
And I said, can she speak? If you tell her to hit the camera button, because that's what happened to me. Hit the camera button on your computer.
Yeah.
And I'll ask because she's chatting in the background. Just
okay. All right.
Tell her to hit the camera button.
Okay.
Yeah. So, Judy, did you want to say anything while we try to get Samira on as well?
I think the sister wanted to say something else. You wanted to say something?
Well, I just wanted to say, I'm not in the medical field. I'm not, I'm not a epidemiologist. I don't work in any of those fields. I'm just a regular person who just happens to have a biology degree, right? And works with organisms in danger of extinction, not humans. But I had to take some classes that give me some insight into how viruses work and into how science works. And a lot of times, because of the fact that there's a lot of profit over people going on, because of the fact that we have been subjected to the tyranny of several governments, due to colonialism, neocolonialism, and all of the ills that trickle down from that reality. we lose sight of the real work that's being done. There's regular people who are actually doing the work on the ground to make sure, as Sister Judy said, to make sure that life is preserved. So absolutely, whenever anyone comes to me and says, this is the best thing ever, I'm not going to believe that. But growing up in Jamaica, seeing what polio looks like, for the people who couldn't get the vaccine, um, you know, seeing what happened to my mother who is deaf in one ear, because of mumps, things like that. And then, seeing the reality that there are so many scientists working on this. It's primarily because the 1% made it a priority and gave the money. They came up off the money. That's really why it moved so fast. And so that's the reality of that. But you know, I think that both things that we've been talking about are very powerful and necessary conversations to have. And yay, Samira is here.
He's back.
Thank you. I have no idea why I have two cameras showing, but we'll just move on. I wanted to add that I agree with all that has been said, especially to echo the rightful skepticism that Brother Bill was mentioning, and it speaks to the journey that we've been on as a community in our relationship with the medical establishment. And it is our job, those of us who are people of color in the medical infrastructure, to listen to our community about these concerns that they have, listen to them and try to sit with them and answer those questions, answer those concerns. And sometimes we're not going to have all the answers. Sometimes, and I don't know, a sincere I don't know is okay. But what I learned in Cuba is that the scientific leaders sat with the population each and every day to educate them about every step of the process, giving them an outline of what the disease was, how it came about, and its relation to the previous SARS viruses. And then also, as things were moving along in this quest for a vaccine, which the whole world, anybody who had the infrastructure for it, and Cuba, even despite being criminally disadvantaged because of the blockade, has always had a priority in biotech and has always made it their priority to make, vaccines for their population. They have a national vaccine program, and 8 out of the 12 vaccines that everyone is required to take are made in Cuba. So once this thing hit that it was a problem, they already started, their biotech community already started searching for it. And as of now, they have 4 candidates for vaccines. The only country in Latin America and the Caribbean that has this capacity is Cuba. And it goes to speak to the fact that they made it a priority to have a healthy, a literate community, a literate population when it comes to health. Health literacy is the pillar of empowering people, returning the franchisement of people that have been disenfranchised due to the politics and due to the capitalist games that are being played in the world. And it's about educating. So yes, the biotechnologists sat down on several news programs to explain what this vaccine that they were trying to develop was going to look like, what parts it was going to have. This is all high-tech terminology for common people. It's understandable. Nobody's going to understand the first time around. That's why they would come back and repeat these things and teach in the local levels, as well as, just aside from being on national TV, everybody had a role. If you knew about it, you had to explain it. Even those of us who are students, we'd have to explain to the residents that we come across who may have questions like, what is going on? Okay, what is this vaccine they're talking about? Why are there so many? Why are there like 4 candidates now versus just focusing on one? Because they're seeking efficacy. And the fact that, yes, everybody is moving fast right now because it's an emergency. At the rate that people are dying, for us, I think American population has become desensitized at seeing numbers and forget that these are human lives that are going one by one by one, and to the point where we now are about to approach 400,000 lives lost. These are human beings who have relations, and it's an epic catastrophe. This in a society that unfortunately prizes a productive human being, and productive human beings are the ones who are dying the most. The ones who are contributors to our society are the ones falling. So it's not just the elderly, it's not just people who have underlying conditions, it's anybody at this point. And so, yes, the pressure is on. The scientists have to work 24/7 to make sure this vaccine comes. And no, you cannot, like Sister Lori Kim said, they came up off the money. They decided to move, instead of making this whole bureaucratic process of red tape about how you move from stage to stage, which is really the headache for most scientists, because people are holding back their talent and their capacity to do their work. But at this point, everybody's pushing them to do it because people are scared, and rightfully so. So now we see what could normally happen if we would actually make health a priority in our economy. If we didn't spend so much time putting money aside for a defense budget to send military out and go fight and defend our country, and we sent the military to stay here, which is another military, is the public health infrastructure, we would actually get somewhere. But that is the fight that we all have to lead. Those of us who are conscious, who are awakening to this truth, we have to continue the fight. We have to raise the priority to be what is on our side, and not what is on the side of the people who want to, make more money. Because if I'm dead, I can't make you more money. And so I need to prioritize my health. And everybody needs to prioritize their health. And we need to be each other's brother and sister's keeper. And that's what solidarity is about. It's not about, saving me when I'm at the point of the brink of death. It's about preventing that from even happening. So I'm going to get off my soapbox, but that's all I wanted to say.
You stay there. That was amazing.
Well, it's well said, and that's in the Kwanzaa spirit of Ujima, making my brother's problem and sister problem my problem, solving them together, and going back to talking about 9/11, because what did they do? They spent all that money looking for weapons of mass destruction that they still looking for. Okay, so it's an old saying, follow the money. But you're right. Both of you are right in talking about them getting off the 1%, kicking out their money. You know why? Because they feared for their own mentality too, because it didn't discriminate. They didn't think that it was going to be this widespread, whether it was legit, conspiracy, cultivated, or natural, or whatever. It got out of control, and the life you save may be your own. So it's now 9:19. I'm gonna go around the table, and give everybody a chance to have any parting comments. I'm gonna start at the top left, which is Lori Kim. You want to say anything in parting?
Okay, can you still hear me? Because my mic has gone out a little bit. But,
yeah, I can hear you. Yes.
Okay.
I said,
great.
Do you want to say anything in parting? Go ahead.
Yes. So what I do want to say is that programs like this, community conversations like this, just to echo what Dr. Sister Samara said, because those conversations are really what's important. Those of us who have information can share that information. That is the basic, because we as Black and Brown people across the world, but specifically in this country, have been denied a lot when it comes to education. Very basic scientific knowledge is not available to us. And it's that is also part of this criminal context that we're living in. So, I love the fact that we're here, and I'm grateful for all the things I've learned today. And I hope that folks can take that with them and start to look more for yourself as well. Look beyond the clickbait to get the truth.
Ashe. Thank you, sister. Judy? You want to say
Yeah,
anything in closing?
sure. I think what we need to do is there's momentum now in the country, at least among our friends. Um, we obviously have a lot of people in this country who are very troubling. But I think that we really need to build on the understanding that we have. What this crisis did is expose the health disparities and the oppression of people of color, and particularly Black people in the city, Indigenous people in the Midwest, and so on, in terms of how this disease replicated itself in our communities, not just because of the comorbidities, but because of all the things that we call the social determinants of health. And it irritates me that whenever we have a crisis, people get this collective amnesia and they go back to business as usual. We can't let things go back to business as usual. We have to continue this fight. We have to demand a national healthcare system, a national health infrastructure, build international solidarity with other countries like Cuba that really have been revolutionary in how they've created a really equitable healthcare system, and bring back our own sense of community with one another. I totally agree that those of us who have information, we have to share it. As nurses in our union, we're really trying to do that because people really do trust us, and we have to use that trust and educate the public and listen to our patients, listen to our communities, engage our communities, develop a healthcare system that takes into account the people that deliver the care, the people that receive the care, and make sure that it's equitable and make sure that it's about health, not disease, not profits. And that's a big fight because in New York State, at least, it's the most profitable enterprise. If you look at the biggest corporations in the state and the biggest industries, it's healthcare and then prisons. So, that sort of is pretty telling. So I just think we have to continue to build this movement around the things that we've learned when people are hurting enough to be open to looking at things differently. Because it's so true. We're so uneducated. We don't have access to science. We don't know our history. There's so much that we have to learn to really make dramatic social changes. And I think it's possible. But it's a big fight.
Well said. Thank you. And Sister Samara, would you like to comment on the topic of today?
Yes, I'd like to thank you all again for this opportunity to share this space in this conversation. And I agree with Sister Judy and Sister Lloyd Kim in what has been said. We do need to educate and engage our community and empower them in this struggle. It is a very trying time for everybody. And the losses are not just, they're not in the economy. That's what the news always like to tell us. But that's far from what the losses that we're gaining at this point. And so we also have to prepare ourselves for, all the consequences of not preparing for what has passed and what has happened. And in that, I would also like to say that it is our duty to continue to push our youth into this line of becoming educated healthcare personnel. And my position as the IFCO Elam Scholarship Program Director, I would encourage youth of our communities who are passionate about pursuing medicine. If maybe you wanted to be a doctor, you never thought it was possible because of the $400,000 debt that you might incur in this system, it is very possible by applying for a scholarship from the Cuban government. So this is something that I would encourage all of us to disseminate that information for people that access requests for application. You just need to go to ifconews.org. You need to be between the ages of 18 to 25. They make exceptions for people who are slightly over the age of 25. You need to be a U.S. citizen. You need to have taken a few prerequisite classes. So you do not have to have a bachelor's degree, but you need to have some few college level courses, 1 year of biology with the lab, 1 year of chemistry with the lab, 1 year of organic chemistry with the lab, and 1 year of physics with the lab. And these are requirements, these are the basic requirements for you to be able to apply for the scholarship. And the education you receive at the Latin American School of Medicine is not just to give you work and to make a career. It's for you to be a change agent, for you to be responsible for your community in ways that unfortunately we haven't been able to assert ourselves because of the system and how it's laid out. But this is a school where people come from all parts of the world to go to school and to be the physicians that their communities need. So that is the purpose and that is the charge. And we continue to hold up that brand of being doctors of science and conscience. We're not just there, to be somebody pushing pills down your throat. So I would encourage you all and everybody listening to seek out the youth who want to be the next physician activists and, be there for our people. So hit up ifconews.org and hopefully you'll find me on the other side to talk to me about what your interest is and your dreams are.
Thank you. I want to thank all your Mark is going to come up. He has an announcement. We have some things coming up, but I just want to just put everything together and say a couple of things that stood out is that you do have to listen to the people. That's what they're saying. That came across many times, that you do have to be an advocate. And also I would like to say that you look at Cuba, it's breaking down stereotypes. Here's a island made out of people that aren't often giving them the credit because they're the color of their skin. And I'm looking at the panel. We have 3 brilliant women on the panel. So we got to continue to dispel those rumors and just keep moving forward and become the changes that we see. Okay, and if you look, it's a flyer on right hand corner, bottom right hand. It talks about Dr. Martin Luther King. It says National Day of Action. It's on January the 18th. It's on a Monday. It's on a commemorated day that the federal government has set aside to celebrate the life of Dr. King. We're going to have speakers, and we're going to have a car caravan because we know that we still have to be socially conscious on 125th Street and 7th Avenue, aka Adam Clayton Boulevard, aka African Square. Okay, right at the statue. So it's a People's United Front, like the sister said, become healthcare activists. I like that terminology. And this is part of it. All right. We have to keep pushing ahead, and we got to continue the momentum that this double pandemic gave us. COVID-19 gave us an opportunity to have a dual pandemic because the social awareness went globally. It didn't go just in New York. It didn't go just in Philly. It didn't go national. It went globally. So we asked everybody to consider that day because we have to put this back on the forefront and use the tools that we have because of this, we have major companies that now made Juneteenth a national holiday where they put workers, no matter what their ethnicity, moving forward this year forward, is going to now be recognized that there's a day off. As we like to say, it's a day on because there's a lot of work to be done. So you have that fight. And Sister Aubrey, is it possible that that information you talked about with Cuba, and could you put that in the chat? Is that possible? So to get the scholarship and whatnot? Is that, I know you said a lot about the
I'm trying to get
qualifications.
to the main chat, but it seems I'm only in the host chat.
Well, if you can't get it like that, then if you was to, I guess, type it up and send to Mark, we can, because that's invaluable information. That information, the way you sharing it, we should be able to get that out. And maybe we can also get that out on the 18th. That'd be a good handout.
Good.
All right.
And
so I don't know.
And if you guys have contact information, we could get you brochures to hand out at your march in the city. So
Yeah, that would be great. I would say right now you do have Mark's contact information, right? All right, so that'd be the vehicle in which we'll do that in. All right, so we went a little over, 30 minutes over. So, but it was great discussion. I want to thank you. I learned a lot. I love your spirit and continue to move forward. As in the words of Fannie Lou Hamer, if you want to kill me, make sure you kill me so I go for 5 feet 4 inches forward to the struggle of justice. So with that, I put our hands up and we're going to say, People-Pueblo power, and we're going to sign off until we meet again.
People-Pueblo power.
People-Pueblo power.